Hello, everybody. Oh, it's nice to sit down. This is great. It's a beautiful theater, but we can't actually see it right now. This is an outstanding panel we got here. We have three real pioneers and leaders in education, not just in New Orleans, but nationally. As everybody, I think, knows, the story of education in New Orleans post-Katrina is one of reform and innovation at a historic level. It's been recognized around the country. We were named America's best city for school reform by the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, and the recognition and accolades keep coming, even as new challenges always appear on seemingly, what, a daily basis? A weekly basis, okay. Well, let me introduce our panelists here. Mr. Patrick Dobard is CEO of New Schools for New Orleans, NSNO. Prior to New Schools, Patrick served as the superintendent of the Louisiana Recovery School District, where he made significant progress in transforming the most chronically low-performing schools in Louisiana, nearly eliminating failing schools in New Orleans. And you can clap for that. That's a yeah. And prior to leaving the RSD, Patrick, in collaboration with the New Orleans Parish School Board, also managed the process to unify RSD and OPSB. No small task. Ms. Whitney Henderson, Navigator-in-Chief at EdNavigator. That's one of those cool titles that I always wanted. Whitney brings to her work a decade of experience as an award-winning teacher, school principal, and instructional expert. Her career in education began in New Orleans, where she moved after Hurricane Katrina to become a founding teacher and eventually the 7th to 9th grade principal at KIPP Central City Academy. Whitney is the recipient of the 2011 Fishman Prize, given annually to just 4 teachers nationwide. We can clap for that. Thank you, Whitney, for being with us here today. And now, Mr. Josh Densen, a friend and founder and executive at Bricolage Academy, an outstanding New Orleans charter school. Josh is the parent of 2 New Orleans public school students, including his son, who is a student at Bricolage, which opened in 2013. Bricolage Academy currently serves grades kindergarten through 4th and will extend to a K-12 school by 2025. Round of applause for our panelists. And so, Patrick, to you.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I want to take us on a short journey and try to paint a picture of education in New Orleans from a personal lens and a professional lens. I was raised in the 7th Ward in New Orleans, the youngest out of 7. My father, Frederick Sr., is a self-employed electrician, and my mother, Hazel, was a homemaker. And one of the things my parents always did was that they stressed to us that hard work, perseverance would take us a long way. But undergirding all of that, they always stressed the importance of having a quality education. And so my parents worked tirelessly to make certain that we understood the value of an education. So I grew up in a family where if you brought home, whatever grades you brought home, there was always an expectation to just do better. So even if you made an A, there was like, how can you improve even upon that? And so out of that mindset, my parents sent my 4 older siblings to neighborhood public schools in New Orleans. My oldest brother, Frederick Jr., my sister, Desi, and my brother, Michael, all attended Joseph S. Clark High School, right there, still in the 7th Ward. My father's still 4 blocks away. And this was in the late 1960s, around 1968 to around 1972. And then my middle brother, Kevin, went to McDonough 35, a semi-select admission black public high school, the oldest black public high school in New Orleans. And he graduated from there around 1975. But in the late 1970s, my parents realized and felt that something wasn't as good in the public schools as it had been. And so they made the decision and scraped up everything they could and used all of their resources they could to send my 2 sisters, Leanne and Linda, right above me to Xavier Prep. And then they sent me to St. Augustine High School. And one thing I'm extremely proud of and be able to sit here and say today, that through those 2 different education experiences, we all were able to graduate high school and not only that, receive college degrees. And I believe it was a testament to the quality education we received. But then I also think back and say, but what happened that my oldest brother, Fred in particular, could graduate from Clark in 1968, be admitted to Tulane University, and graduate from Tulane in the early 70s, and yet in 2005, right before Katrina, that same high school was the lowest performing high school according to state accountability measures in the state of Louisiana. Where if you make it even more personal, a young black man at Clark at that time really had no chance or opportunity to receive what my brother received in that same school, literally that same building, just a few decades earlier. But it makes me realize how remarkable the progress we've made in New Orleans over the last decade plus. When you look at it, we've been able to increase significantly the choice options that families have, so that no longer in New Orleans does your zip code determine the destiny of the school that you're going to attend. And so we've increased the quality of schools tremendously. Secondly, we've been able to actualize upon the single largest school reconstruction project in our nation's history. So children don't have to just go to other places, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, and see state-of-the-art buildings. They are now home here in buildings that show what we think of them as a community, that we love them and that they should have the best educational environment possible. Thirdly, we've significantly improved our services to our students with special needs and disabilities, and seeing that they are now more on time and on target with their peers. And then we've also made certain that we've created strong school models to just continue to push the education progress forward. So we have a lot to be proud of that we've accomplished over the last decade plus. But there are some challenges ahead. When we think about education in New Orleans and we think about where we want to be, it's not all rosy. There's still a lot of hard work to do. Just recently, school performance scores came out. And when we looked at those scores, we realized that over the last couple of years in New Orleans, we've sort of flatlined, and worse than that, in some instances, we've gone backwards a little bit, and this is really unacceptable. And so as we think about what's needed going ahead, we have to make certain that, our schools continue to develop young people and create curriculum and standards that's going to raise the tide for everyone. And so we can't make excuses about challenges outside, but what we have to do is address those challenges in order to improve the quality of life outcomes for kids. And then we also have to make certain that as we do that, we have to reward and strengthen our teacher workforce. And hopefully many of you have heard yesterday we announced a $13 million grant that we just received for New Orleans from the U.S. Department of Education to fund some of our major universities and some nonprofit partners in order to help retain and recruit more teachers to work in New Orleans. We need over 800 new teachers every year, and this $13 million is going to go a long way for us to achieve that. And then we've also, when you think about the progress we've made, we still have to continue to support and have innovative and new school models. We have to support programs such as the one you hear Whitney talk about, where we can help parents really literally navigate the system. We need more great schools like Bricolage, which Josh has thought of, created, and put into action, where it is the highest demand open enrollment school in the city. It's phenomenal, the work that they're doing. And so we have to continue those things. We have to continue to build what we started. But I'll pull back in closing to try to establish a vision for us as a city. I think this is a great time for us to be reminiscing about the 300-year tricentennial of our city. And I think back, though, to my brother, and then to also young people who look like him, that we had in New Orleans a black male on-time graduation rate that has significantly increased. But at the same time, we still know that we're having trouble getting young people just in and through college. And it makes me think about, when we go forward, what type of system do we really want to have? And I put forward to us a vision today that we should have a vision where we have quality life outcomes for all kids. It's no different than what my father and my mother wanted for me and my siblings. They wanted a quality life outcome for us. And quite simply, oftentimes in different environments, I break it down as the simple thing as the difference between living and surviving. Too many of our young people in this city are just surviving. They get high school diploma. They'll even go into college. They might even graduate from college. But they're still just surviving. They're still paycheck to paycheck and not living quality lives. We have to change that. We have to push to quality life outcomes for all children, and we have to cover every sector of education to do that. And we've proven that when we put our mind to it and we have intentionality around it, we can easily do that. And there's a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work, but we can move that way. And so we just simply have a vision for New Orleans that we can have quality life outcomes for all kids. And I'll close with this. I just believe that New Orleans, and we have a lot of celebration, and I see a lot of festiveness in this occasion, and we're often known for our French heritage and the feeling of les laissez-faire, les bon temps roulés. But what I would hope that when we start working on this and we move forward into the future, that people will also say something, hearkening on our French heritage about education in Louisiana and New Orleans in particular, that they would say, la meilleure éducation publique du monde, the best public education in the world. Thank you.
Merci bien, Patrick.
Merci.
Et encore, Madame Henderson.
Thank you. So I think, Patrick, you teed me up actually perfectly because I'm going to talk a little bit about the parent perspective and what we've seen over the few years in New Orleans. And so I want to start with a proof point, and that proof point is Ruby Bridges. I think her name is synonymous with one of the most tumultuous and victorious moments in New Orleans public education history, which would be the desegregation of public schools in 1960. And oftentimes when I think about her name and I think about her journey and I think about her experience, I oftentimes think about the people who are in her ear positively saying, you can do it, persist, resist, make sure that your voice is heard, don't be afraid. And those people that I'm speaking of are her parents. They were the ones, Lucille and Abram Bridges, who every single day encouraged her and said, you can do it. I know that this seems tough. I know that this seems difficult. However, your history and your legacy will precede you. And today, we see public schools the way that we are because of a strong legacy and a strong heritage that was built off of a parent's love, that was built off of parents who said, you can do it. And so when we think about our work at EdNavigator, we start that as a foundation. Families have love. Families are a common thread in our community that we cannot minimize because if and when we do, we will start to see less evidence of powerful people, and those are children, every single day. And so when we think about that lesson learned, that's major, right? Like we need to be able to have conversations about how we are giving families and parents more access and seats at the table when it comes to educational decision making. However, it is a lesson that we are learning imperfectly at EdNavigator. And so still today in 2017, in spite of legacies and histories that have really brought us a long way from where we've come in the past, we still have parents who say, I feel pushed out and I feel shut out of a system that doesn't value my voice. Because what I hear about me as a parent or my narrative is, I'm not involved enough, I'm not engaged enough, I'm hard to reach. But we know that at EdNavigator to not be true. The families that we have access to every single day, which I'll describe in just a second, tell another story, another narrative, very similar to Ruby Bridges' parents who want as much as they can possibly get out of the education for their children, who want to be able to be at the table and saying, I believe that this is right for not just my kid. Words like my, mine, I, we hear far too often. But when I think about the history of New Orleans, I love how Deacon John said it. He used the word amalgamation, a mixture. That means that we have to take and put together multiple different types of perspectives, multiple different types of judgments to be able to come together and make a collective decision on behalf of all kids and not just some. And so when we think about our work at EdNavigator, basically our model is pretty simple. My work when I was a public school teacher and also an administrator and principal, one of the most common things that I would hear from parents is that I'm unable to come because I'm at work. And I don't think that parents should be minimized because they're trying to make a living for themselves, as Patrick said, that they're trying to get by. What we need to do is adapt as schools and as a community and meet them where they are. And that's what essentially we do at EdNavigator. Our navigators are people who are from the school system in New Orleans, who are former school principals, teachers, counselors, instructional coaches, you name it. And we go into the job site. So where parents aren't able to, we don't supplant. What we do is we build upon what their needs are. So we go in and we meet them before their shifts, during their lunch break, after their lunch break. Their employers know that it's totally fine for them to clock out really fast and come meet with us. And what we do is we help them understand how their kids are doing in school. We have access to their records, and we basically break down school speak and the jargon that sometimes complicates things and pushes parents out and makes them feel less educated because they don't know what social justice may mean in the curriculum or what spatial awareness may mean. And so we break down education in a micro way so that they feel, or so that it feels accessible to them in ways that they can actually empower their own children. And so you can think of it as educational concierge. And so it is something that the upper echelon has always had access to because they have friends in high places who worked at the school board and things of this nature that allowed them to be able to know the language before others and in ways that actually position them to be a little bit better off than not. And so for our partners like Tulane University, the Marriott, for the Hyatt and Ochsner Hospital and so many other employer partners who we work with, we take our work as honorable because we definitely want to make sure that it's making a difference. And I can speak to one personal example, which is a family that I navigate for. So this father is a jazz musician at Preservation Hall. And when we first were introduced, one of the things that he told me was, Whitney, my schedule, I travel so much. My baby is going to kindergarten. It's been so long since I actually had a kid in the school system. I have no idea where to even start. And I said, don't fret, don't worry about it. We're gonna be on this journey together. And so basically I sat with him and I walked him through all of the types of learning targets that she should be going through at her preschool. And now when we look at their journey today, one of his most favorite parts of the day is actually homework time. To be able to sit with his baby and to be able to say, I actually feel empowered because I know specifically what spatial awareness means right now. I know specifically what it means when I see her make this movement and what types of questions I should be asking her as she's reading her books at night. And that's the type of empowerment that we need to be able to see another 300 years of New Orleans that is truly empowering its youth. So as I close, again, it's a lesson that we've learned totally imperfectly, but when I think about the trajectory of schools in New Orleans, schools oftentimes aim to equip children with the tools that they need to achieve and to be successful. But they often do that in isolation of parents. They often do that in silos. And one of the things that I definitely want to make clear today, as we kind of bring, I know that even the program itself is very segmented to say, here's one industry, but I know that the intent wasn't that. The intent is how can we bring these industries together to be able to work as an amalgamation and as a social thread in this community that we love so deeply, and weave these pieces together so that we can truly make impact in a way that 300 years from now, we see evidence of a New Orleans that came together, that was unified, and that was collective. And we can take that proof point of Ruby Bridges, and her parents, and we can go truly far with the way that we're trying to shift the way that education looks in the city today. Thank you.
Great. And I will say, I don't know if Whitney knows this, I think you do, but in light of the DXC announcement and all of the new families that are going to be coming here as a result of that announcement, we're going to be formally working with EdNavigator to help onboard them into the school system. So it's all coming together. That's right. There's a little shimmy, shimmy, shake. And speaking of shimmy, shimmy, shake, Josh Densen.
Thank you. It was great to hear the two of you speak about like connecting like today to times in the 1960s, because I wonder, you know, what changed from that time to this time. And a writer and researcher named Robert Putnam, who's out of Harvard, he wrote this great book called Our Kids. And it tells what changed in America writ large, but also in New Orleans, of course, in that time from the 1960s to today. And one of the main things that changed is people stopped viewing schools, public schools, for all of our kids, and instead viewed public schools as a place for other people's kids, or a place just for my kids. And instead, we have to change this perspective of yours or mine, but really about ours, right? This is about our city and about our kids. And that really is what drove me, in some respects, to start working on an idea that would become a public school in Bricolage. So Bricolage, it's a great word, it's a French word. It means creation from a diverse range of available things. It usually is used in art to describe like a sculpture that brings together random pieces and parts that wouldn't always come together, but they come together to create something brand new. It's also used in education to mean a way of learning by trying and testing and playing around. So a guy like MacGyver or the A-Team, who would always find creative ways through a solution, they're practicing bricolage. So that's what bricolage means as a word, but how it plays out as a school. See, we have kids from all walks of life at Bricolage. We're an open enrollment school. We opened in 2013, and much like, I think, the vision of Ruby Bridges' parents, our kids are going to school with other kids who share their background and their identity, and other kids who do not share their background or their identity, and they're able, in that diversity, to advance equity, to really understand what it means that different kids can come from different situations at home, but still achieve equitable outcomes and still have an equitable chance at life. Now, what that really means in practicality is the way a school approaches them, kind of by its nature, has to be unique and has to be personalized and individualized to respond to and be thoughtful of their every individual kid's situation, because after all, these are our children. Now, what also is happening is that the world is changing rapidly, right? So our kids that entered in 2013, they're going to graduate from college in 2030. So they started in 2013, they're graduating in 2030. That's, maybe my math isn't so good, but that's about 17 years or so, right? If you go back from 2013, 17 years, think about how that world changed from 1997 to 2013. The world changed entirely. And we have to have that same idea that the world's going to continue to change that rapidly. So we have to prepare kids. And what we do at Bricolage is really prepare kids for navigating an ever-changing world that's increasingly ethnically and racially and culturally diverse, where kids from any background can tackle any ambiguous or strange challenge and learn to be like the driver of their own life story through that process. And what's amazing, there's two things that I really reflect on that I think are germane here. The one is it's resonated so far. So Bricolage is the most in-demand kindergarten of any school in the One App, for the last 3 years. And we have the highest performance of any non-selective school in the city. Those are great things for a school that's only in its 5th year. There's a challenge here, though. And that challenge is that we still have an achievement gap within our school, where kids who are called white achieve at an A level, if we're using the letter grades that we use throughout the school. And kids who we call black are achieving at a C level at our school. That's a big gap within our school. And that is something that we work on every day, and we're not going to have equitable outcomes until those two things are the same. But what's even more challenging, and I think really important for all of us to work together on, is that our African American students at that level are still outperforming 80% of the schools in the city. So we have made tremendous strides. That's evident and good, and I don't believe a school like Bricolage is possible in any other city other than New Orleans, but it's really sobering to also consider how far we have to go if we're really going to create a school system that's for all of our kids in a city that's worthy of all of us together.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Josh and Whitney and Patrick. And I guess this is the part we ask you to take us to the bridge, huh?
All right. It's my pleasure to introduce and call out onto the stage now the Carver High Drumline. Come on out.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Carver High School Drumline.